At our divorce hearing, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'll finally live off his fortune." The room burst into laughter. Reporters, spectators, even her own lawyer tried to hide a smile. I didn't. I just reached into my briefcase, handed the judge an envelope, and whispered, "Check the date on her signature." 10 seconds later, the judge started laughing so hard her gavel nearly slipped. And that's when my wife turned ghost white. You could hear her breath hitch as her whole empire of lies collapsed in real time. That day I learned silence can be louder than revenge. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you're here with me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes knowing someone's listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My name is Quillen Rook, and this isn't just a story about betrayal or money. It's about how I lost everything I thought was real and found something much more powerful: the truth. If you've ever been lied to, manipulated, or made to feel small, hit that subscribe button. Join me, because no one deserves to face the storm alone. The night of the gala still burns in my memory like the desert heat, beautiful from afar, unbearable up close. Georgia O'Keeffe Museum shimmered in soft amber light, every wall covered with shades of sand and bone, the kind of art that made silence feel expensive. I was there because my co-founder insisted. Sierra Glyph had just closed a $12 million round, and investors wanted me to smile for photos, hold a glass of Pinot, and look like I wasn't dying inside from exhaustion. I'd been coding for 16 hours a day, chasing due diligence and negotiating clauses that could choke the air out of a startup. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, much less for being admired. That's when I saw her, Aurelia Vance. She stood near the gallery's main arch, a silver dress catching the light like it was made of reflection itself. She had that rare ability to make everyone around her seem less alive. I was halfway through a polite nod when she stepped closer, smiling as if she already knew what to say. "You're Quillen Rook, aren't you, Sierra Glyph's founder? I read about your funding round 12 million, right?" Her tone wasn't admiration. It was assessment. She didn't ask about my product like others did. She went straight for the core. "Tell me," she said, "how did you handle the IP clauses during Series B? Did you maintain founder vesting or restructured under a new cap table?" It caught me off guard. Most people at these events used buzzwords to sound smart. She spoke like she lived inside the documents. I told her a little, enough to seem open but not reckless. She nodded, listening closely as if she was taking notes behind those calm hazel eyes. Then she smiled. "You're rare," she said. "You chose integrity over acquisition. Most people would have sold out." That line landed exactly where my ego lived. For a man who'd spent years being told he was too idealistic, her words felt like a reward. We drifted from the gallery into the rooftop bar. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains stretched beyond the city lights, the desert wind slicing through the night like truth itself. She talked about color and pattern, about how O'Keeffe painted isolation like it was an act of courage. "It's the same with building something from scratch," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "The world sees beauty. You see survival." She asked about my routines, my insomnia, my mission. It didn't feel invasive, it felt like being understood. When she leaned over and asked, "Do you scan every contract yourself?" I laughed. Of course. Every signature's like a fingerprint. She grinned, her eyes flicking toward the Uniball Sino pen clipped to my jacket. "Beautiful tool," she said. "Clean, consistent. Reliable ink." I didn't know that single detail, her noticing my pen would one day become a weapon. We exchanged numbers before leaving, her perfume faintly mixed with desert sage. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "You look like someone who finally found peace under all that pressure. Hope you got home safe." The precision of the timing made me feel like I'd just been chosen. That night I stood by the hotel window, watching the desert stretch into infinity. She'd told me earlier. The desert never hides anything under the sun. I believed her then. I didn't realize some lies bloom best under starlight. 6 months later, I thought I had found peace. Our adobe house on Canyon Road looked like something out of a Restoration magazine, wooden balcony facing the mountains, sunlight pooling across whitewashed walls, mornings that smelled of coffee and sage. Aurelia fit into it effortlessly, like the house had been built to match her. She made breakfast before I was awake, left handwritten notes in my briefcase, sent flowers to Sierra Glyph every Friday with messages like, "Keep building, dreamer." It was intoxicating, someone who not only understood my world, but seemed to want to build it with me. She would sit in my home office, legs folded under her, flipping through insurance forms and warranty receipts. "You need someone to keep you organized," she'd say, half teasing, half assertive. I didn't argue. She offered to help sort through old contracts, just insurance renewals, utilities, stuff like that. I'd been buried in code, so I let her. When she asked for access to my cloud folder just to rearrange things, I granted view-only permission. She laughed, called me paranoid, and kissed my cheek. I took it as affection, not strategy. Late one night, I came home from the rail yard office. The lights in my study were on. I walked in quietly, expecting to find her reading, but she flinched as if caught. The scanner still hummed. "I was looking for the printer warranty," she said, smiling too quickly, shutting the lid. The screen froze again. I nodded, too tired to question. A week later, I was sorting mail when a bank notification slipped out, a transaction summary I didn't recognize. Cash advances, Las Vegas casinos, online betting platforms I'd never heard of. $38,000 in total. My chest went cold. When I confronted her, she collapsed into tears before I finished the sentence. "It's not what it looks like," she sobbed. I just needed to feel something real again. The stress, the silence, it got to me. Her words were rehearsed, yet fragile enough to sound true. Then came the shift. "You love your company more than me," she said. Voice trembling, eyes red. "You'd rather marry your code." I wanted to argue, to shout, but guilt weighed heavier. Maybe she was right. I'd built walls of data and spreadsheets, and she was the first person who'd ever tried to step inside. So I did what logic told me not to. I paid the debt. Quietly. To save her. To save us. We made a rule after that: full transparency. She promised to stop gambling, to start therapy, to rebuild trust. I believed her because I needed to. I even admired how she tried to clean things up. Every surface sparkled, every file was neatly labeled. One afternoon, I watched her wipe down the scanner glass with alcohol and a linen cloth until it gleamed. "Clean things work better," she said softly. I smiled, not realizing she wasn't cleaning for efficiency. She was erasing fingerprints. That night, as she slept beside me, I opened my laptop to review cloud activity logs. I'd started enabling internal audits weeks earlier just to keep things secure. I saw a familiar name accessing the shared folder at odd hours. My heart hesitated. I shut the laptop, convincing myself it was just her organizing. After all, trust needed room to breathe. The next morning, she handed me coffee, kissed my forehead, and said, "We're okay now, right?" I nodded, not knowing the cracks had already started widening beneath the adobe walls. She smiled. "See, clean and simple, just how I like it." Outside, the desert shimmered in the morning sun. It looked pure, untouched, endless. But somewhere beneath that blinding light, something was already moving, quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment to surface. The morning light in Santa Fe cut through the adobe walls like a blade, sharp and colorless. I came home earlier than usual to grab my laptop charger before a call with investors. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the printer and the scent of fresh ink drifting through the hall. When I stepped into my office, Aurelia was there, kneeling by the file cabinet, a folder, half-open papers spread like feathers on the floor. The label on the folder read, "Cap Table, Restricted." She looked up, startled, her voice too calm for surprise. "Oh, hey. I was just looking for our tax forms." The sheet in her hand wasn't a tax document. It was a copy of Sierra Glyph's business license, the one stamped with the company's registration seal. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Put that back." Her lips curved into a soft, unbothered smile, but her fingers lingered a second too long before she slid the paper into place. After she left the room, I checked the cabinet. Files were rearranged, subtle but not random. Some had sticky notes in handwriting that wasn't mine. My pulse tightened. I opened my security app, reviewing motion logs from the week before. 3 nights between 1 and 3 a.m., the camera in my office had recorded movement. I'd been asleep beside her each time. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Priya Basu, a woman who spoke with the kind of precision that made even truth sound like a legal clause. I told her what I'd seen, what I suspected. There was a pause on the other end, then she said, "Quillen, if she's accessing company documents, we're moving into dangerous territory. I've handled cases where a spouse backdated signatures to turn private equity into marital property. It happens more often than you'd think." Her tone carried the weight of experience. "If she gets you to sign anything under the pretext of shared assets, don't. Not without review." That night, I tightened every lock. I changed the safe code reset, the cloud passwords, activated file access alerts for after-hours logins. Every scan or printout now left a digital watermark with a timestamp. I set up an audit trail so complete it felt like I was fortifying a castle. Priya helped me review the prenup, my business contracts, and even drafted preliminary divorce documents just in case I needed to act first. I hated the thought, but I hated ignorance more. A few days later, while cleaning my desk, I noticed my pens scattered the Uniball Signo I'd used for investor signatures and a Pilot G2 I'd barely touched. I muttered to myself, "Ink always leaves a trace." She looked up from the kitchen counter where she was organizing mail and asked casually, "Which model is that?" I told her without thinking. She nodded, smiled, and went back to sorting envelopes. That evening, as we ate in silence, she reached across the table and touched my hand. "You know what's yours is mine," she said. Her tone was light, but her eyes searched me for a reaction. I forced a small smile, feeling the line between affection and intrusion blur beyond recognition. After dinner, she turned on music and danced alone by the balcony, the city lights flickering across her silver dress like a reflection of the night we met. I stood in the doorway of my office, looking at the locked drawer she'd touched that morning. My mind replayed every accident, every late-night scan, every careful question she'd ever asked about equity and IP. Something inside me hardened. If she crossed that line again, I wouldn't wait for her to decide what came next. I would. When I finally turned off the light, the printer blinked once before going dark. The sound was small, almost apologetic, like the end of something that used to be ordinary. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Financial Crimes Division of the Santa Fe Police Department. The air smelled of burnt coffee and stale paper. Detective Noah Calder greeted me with the calm weariness of someone who'd seen too much deceit to be surprised by anything. When I explained my situation, he listened quietly, tapping a pen against his notebook. "You're not the first," he said finally. "Aurelia Vance has been on my radar for years." He pulled out a folder thick and creased from handling. "Grant Ellery, construction business out of Denver. Married to her for 2 years. Lost half his assets when she submitted what looked like a legitimate partnership agreement complete with his verified signature." I felt my throat tighten. Calder handed me photocopies of the case notes. He claimed forgery, but there wasn't enough forensic evidence at the time. She was careful, always one step ahead. I drove to Denver the next morning, snow dusting the highway like ash. Grant met me in a half-empty diner on Colfax Avenue. He looked older than his 45 years, skin pale under the neon lights. "You're the tech guy she married after me," he said not unkindly. "Guess it's your turn." He told me how she'd brought him whiskey one night, said she needed a signature to finalize some vendor payment. He'd signed half asleep. Months later, that same page had become a contract declaring her co-owner of his company. "She's brilliant," he said, shaking his head. "A heart wrapped in legalese." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a printed email with the subject line, "Draft Cap Agreement .docs." Sent from Aurelia's address at 2:14 a.m., 3 weeks after their divorce was finalized. The metadata highlighted in red showed the file had been created after the settlement date. "I kept it," Grant said. "Didn't know why. Guess now I do." Back in Santa Fe, Calder showed me another file, Miles Ansel, a real estate investor from Phoenix. Same playbook, he said. She claimed he'd signed over property interests. Case dropped for lack of proof. Miles had emailed me after Calder reached out. Attached was a scan of his old signature. When I opened it, the air in my lungs froze. The loops, the slant, the pressure, identical to mine. I dug through my own contracts that night. The resemblance was eerie, as if my handwriting had been rehearsed, perfected, and weaponized. Calder's words echoed in my head. She studies her targets, practices until she owns their hand. I asked him, "How early do you think she started learning mine?" He didn't hesitate. "Probably the night you met her. People like her collect details before they collect hearts." I drove home at dawn, the desert fading from gold to white under the rising sun. On the way, I searched my phone for photos from that gala. In one, Aurelia stood beside me holding a glass of wine. On the cocktail table next to her was a napkin with a faint signature the same shape as mine. I remembered scribbling it when explaining our product flow to a potential investor. She must have kept it. My first autograph for her and the blueprint for everything that followed. When I got home, the house was too quiet. The smell of lavender cleaner hung in the air. Aurelia was in the bedroom folding clothes into a leather suitcase. "Don't worry," she said before I could speak. "I just need a few days away to clear my head." I glanced at the papers beside her luggage. Blank sheets embossed with Sierra Glyph's watermark. My stomach turned. I knew exactly what she planned to fill them with. That evening, I emailed Detective Calder a formal request to open a fraud investigation. I attached copies of Grant's email, Miles's scanned signature, and the metadata reports. He replied with one line, "We'll take it from here." As I signed the police report, I looked down at my own name on the form, my handwriting suddenly foreign. Every stroke of ink felt heavier than it should, like a contract between the past and the truth. For the first time, I understood what Priya meant when she said ink remembers. From that moment on, I did too. The Department of Public Safety's document analysis lab was nothing like the world outside its walls. Out there, the desert glowed gold and soft under a wide New Mexico sky. In here, everything was steel and fluorescence, cold white and absolute. I followed Detective Calder through the narrow hallway, my shoes echoing against tile. The room smelled faintly of ethanol and printer ink. Tamsin Reed was younger than I expected, 29 maybe, with cropped hair and eyes that saw too much too quickly. She spoke fast, each word clipped with purpose. "You're the tech founder, right? The one whose wife filed partnership documents last month?" I nodded. She slipped on gloves and gestured toward a stack of folders. "Those are the originals she submitted. Let's see what the ink has to say." Under the microscope, my signature looked foreign, trembling, overconfident at the same time. The pen strokes weren't connected naturally. You see that she said pointing, traced lines. Someone lifted your signature and copied it stroke by stroke. She adjusted the magnifier, and under ultraviolet light, faint silver flecks glimmered through the black. That shimmer, she explained, comes from a polymer additive. Uniball Signo 307 gel ink. Manufactured only 6 months ago. She turned another page. "But your wife's document is dated 18 months back. That's a problem for her." Calder leaned forward. "Enough to press charges." "Not yet," she said. "She hasn't used it publicly. If she presents this in court, it becomes intent to defraud. That's when we move." I exhaled, realizing for the first time that patience could be a weapon. Tamsin slid another sheet beneath the scope. Here, she murmured, zooming in. Notice the font on the phrase "signed willingly," slightly thinner, spacing a 0.2 millimeter difference in kerning. It was lifted from another document entirely. She pasted it in. Calder gave a low whistle, meticulous but sloppy in the details. Tamsin printed her findings, signing the report with an elegant flourish. She sealed it in a thick envelope marked Exhibit R13. When she handed it to me, the paper felt heavier than its weight. Evidence didn't just prove things, it anchored reality. Back in my office that night, I read the forensic report 3 times. The hum of my printer filled the room, steady and low, the same rhythm I'd heard countless nights building my company. I could smell the faint heat of new ink and thought of Aurelia wiping the scanner glass weeks ago, her voice lilting, "Clean things work better." I placed the envelope inside the safe, spun the dial, and whispered to myself, "Let her walk into her own trap." At midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Make sure you've got all the documents ready. Court's calling soon." I typed back steady fingers against the glow of the screen. Already prepared. Then I turned off the light and watched the city sleep, knowing that truth now had a timestamp. She chose El Farol, the old adobe restaurant on Canyon Road, the kind of place where music and secrets mixed easily. The yellow lamps cast soft halos over the wooden tables, and the scent of mezcal drifted between conversations. When I arrived, she was already there, a glass of red wine half empty before her. "You look tired," she said lightly, as if we were still married. I sat across from her. She smiled with that same effortless calm that once disarmed me. "Let's end this peacefully," she began. 50-50 split. Quick. Clean. Then she slid a thin envelope across the table. I didn't touch it. "What's this proof that you already agreed?" she said. "Signed and dated 18 months ago." My own name stared back at me from the paper-perfect strokes, familiar loops. I had to fight the urge to laugh. She had no idea the lab had already mapped every molecule of that ink. "And if I don't agree?" I asked. Her voice softened into something almost kind. "Then the court will. They believe me, Quillen. They always do. I've learned how to make signatures speak for me." I let a smile ghost across my face, careful not to overplay it. My phone recorded every word in my pocket. "Maybe I just need 48 hours to think," I said. "I still want to be fair." She touched my wrist. "That's all I've ever wanted." Outside, the wind picked up scattering dust across the parking lot. I walked to my car and sat in the dark, replaying the conversation, her voice sharp and steady on the recording. Then I checked my laptop. A security alert blinked. Someone was accessing my company's cloud folder. The timestamp matched the moment she'd left the restaurant. She wasn't even subtle. Using a read-only account, she'd run an automated script to pull original contract files. I saved the logs and sent them to Calder. His reply came minutes later. "She's getting ready to submit. Exactly what we need." At 2 a.m, another email arrived from a private address labeled Law Assist Private. The attachment was the same fraudulent contract, except the metadata now listed the author as AV. I forwarded it to Priya. Her message came back almost instantly. "Perfect. Let her file it. The moment she does, it's over." The next morning, I watched her from the window as she left the house. She was dressed in white, the same color she'd worn at our wedding, her briefcase clutched like a trophy. I didn't stop her. The trap was already set. That evening, the sky over Santa Fe turned copper. I sat alone on the balcony, the wind carrying the faint music of El Farol down the hill. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. "When someone lies long enough, they start believing it's the truth. I'll let the truth laugh for me." An hour later, my phone vibrated with a final text from her. "Tomorrow we'll settle everything in court." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then typed back, "Yes, everything." The desert outside was silent except for the whisper of the wind through the canyon, the same sound the night we met when she'd told me the desert hides nothing under the sun. I finally understood what she'd left out. It hides everything in the dark. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The First Judicial District Court in Santa Fe buzzed with the tension of a theater before curtain rise. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, spreading over the adobe red walls, turning the room into something both holy and merciless. Every seat was taken: local journalists, Sierra Glyph employees, even Grant Ellery and Miles Ansell in the third row, their faces a mix of vengeance and relief. Aurelia sat across the aisle, dressed in cream, calm and flawless, the way she'd always been before striking. Her attorney straightened his tie and began his opening statement, painting her as the devoted wife who sacrificed everything for her husband's empire. She stood beside him through years of sleepless nights, he declared, and now she only asks for her fair share. The courtroom hummed with murmurs of sympathy. I didn't move. My hands rested on the sealed envelope marked Exhibit R13. The paper cool under my fingers. Then Aurelia rose without waiting for her attorney's cue. "Your Honor," she began, her voice practiced and resonant. "I wish to speak for myself." Judge Harper Quinn, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, allowed it with a measured nod. Aurelia opened her leather case and pulled out a thick stack of papers, each corner aligned with precision. I have here, she announced, the original agreement my husband willingly signed, granting me 50% of Sierra Glyph's holdings. I only seek what was promised. A ripple of whispers swept the room. I kept my gaze low, steady, waiting. Then she said it, the line that would haunt her forever. After today, she proclaimed, I'll finally live off his fortune. I've earned every cent. 3 years of endurance, and now it's time to collect. Laughter began in the back rows, soft at first, then spreading, uneasy, uncontrolled. Judge Quinn banged her gavel, but the smirk at her lips betrayed her composure. Aurelia mistook it for approval. This marriage was a transaction, she continued, raising her voice over the noise. And I'm here to reclaim my return on investment. I stood. Your Honor, I said, calm and even, may I approach the bench? The judge gestured forward. I carried the envelope to her, every step deliberate. Please, ma'am, I said quietly, check the date of the ink and the metadata embedded in her document. She slit the seal, unfolded the report, and read. The room hushed. Her eyebrows rose first. Then came the smallest sound, a sharp exhale that turned into something else. Laughter, not mockery, not cruelty. The raw, uncontrollable laughter of truth finally surfacing. Judge Quinn wiped her eyes. Mrs. Vance, she said, steadying her tone, the ink used in this so-called contract was manufactured 6 months ago. The document's metadata shows it was edited 5 weeks ago. Your signature is traced, layered, and digitally altered. The murmurs in the courtroom turned into gasps. Aurelia's hands trembled. There must be some mistake, some technical issue. No mistake, the judge said. The logs your husband provided show you accessed his files after filing for divorce. You've just submitted evidence of your own fraud. The color drained from Aurelia's face. 2 deputies moved closer. I said softly, Ink doesn't lie, Your Honor. Only the hand that wields it does. Judge Quinn nodded. Mrs. Vance, you are under arrest for document fraud, forgery, and attempted misappropriation of private assets. The sound of metal cuffs clicked through the room. As they led her away, she turned to me, her voice a whisper cracking at the edges. How did you do it? I didn't, I said. Time did. The judge struck her gavel one final time, the echo filling the chamber like the closing of a chapter. Reporters swarmed as the deputies escorted Aurelia out, flashes lighting her pale face. Calder appeared beside me, hand extended. You just gave a lot of people permission to fight back, he said quietly. Outside, the desert light was blinding. For the first time in years, it didn't feel cruel. It felt honest. 6 months later, Santa Fe shimmered under the summer sun, dry and endless. The storm had passed, leaving only heat, silence, and a strange kind of clarity. Aurelia Vance was sentenced to 5 years for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. The media called it the case of the laughing judge. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered in law schools and dinner tables. The investigation expanded, uncovering 3 ex-husbands and 2 wealthy partners who'd fallen for the same performance. This time they came forward. Together their testimonies closed every loophole she once slipped through. For weeks after the trial, I felt nothing. No joy, no triumph, just an echoing emptiness where the battle used to live. The quiet was heavier than conflict. Then one afternoon an envelope arrived, no return address, just my name in blue ink. Inside was a note from Grant Ellery. Because of you, we got our lives back. Thank you for not giving up. That was the beginning of something new. I founded up the Blue Ink Foundation, a nonprofit supporting victims of financial manipulation. Calder joined as an advisor, and Tamsin Reed, who had dissected every inch of forged ink, helped design workshops on digital forensics and personal document protection. She once said, technology makes deception easier, but it also gives truth better tools. I adopted that as our motto. One evening while cleaning the Canyon Roadhouse, I found the Uniball Signo 307 Aurelia once asked about, the same model she used to forge my name. I placed it in a small glass frame and labeled it Proof of Truth. The house had changed. It was no longer a stage for control, but a space for rebuilding. Employees from Sierra Glyph returned laughter filling the courtyard. The company survived. So did I. One day, an anonymous email reached the Foundation's inbox. The message was short. Not everyone in the desert stays buried. The IP traced back to the penitentiary where Aurelia was serving time. I didn't reply. I archived it. The past could still speak, but it no longer had power. That evening I climbed to the roof as the sun bled across the horizon. The sky turned the same deep crimson as the mountains that once witnessed our beginning. The air was warm, steady, forgiving. I whispered, "The ink has dried. I'm still here." Months later, I stood before a lecture hall at the University of New Mexico addressing a room full of law students. Behind me, the first slide read, "The Case of the Laughing Judge." I told them about deception evidence and the strange grace of patience. At our divorce hearing, I began, she boasted she'd live off my fortune. The crowd laughed. But so did the judge after checking the date on her signature. The students leaned in, caught between disbelief and admiration. I smiled. "You can forge handwriting," I said, "but not time." Outside, through the tall windows, the desert shimmered in the late afternoon light, no longer cruel, no longer hiding anything. It simply reflected what had always been there, the truth clear and unbreakable. There's something people don't tell you about surviving betrayal. It doesn't end when the courtroom doors close or when the handcuffs click. It doesn't end when your name is cleared or when the world finally sees what you always knew. It ends, if it ever truly does, in the quiet moments afterward when you're sitting alone in a house that used to echo with someone else's footsteps, realizing the silence no longer hurts. It's strange how survival feels less like victory and more like rebuilding a language you once forgot how to speak. I used to think revenge was the only thing strong enough to carry me through. That if I exposed her, if I made the truth undeniable, I'd feel free. But freedom didn't come with her conviction. It came months later in the way I could finally sleep without checking my office logs, in the way I could laugh again with my team without the weight of suspicion in the back of my mind. It came in the way the desert air hit my lungs, sharp, clean, unfiltered. Sometimes I walk down Canyon Road in the evenings, passing the same adobe walls that once hid all my fears. People look at me and see the man who won a famous case, but that's not who I am. I'm just someone who learned the cost of trust and the strength it takes to rebuild it. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing you loved a ghost, that the person you let closest to your heart was always performing. But grief, I've found, is also proof that you were capable of loving honestly. And that honesty, no matter how much it hurt you, is what makes you whole again. Every lie she wrote carried my name. Every signature she forged carried my faith. And yet in the end, it wasn't rage that saved me. It was evidence, discipline, and time. Truth doesn't shout. It waits. It lets liars grow comfortable, confident, reckless. And when the moment comes, it doesn't need to fight, it simply reveals. That's what the courtroom laughter really was, the sound of truth resurfacing after years buried under polish and charm. It wasn't cruel laughter. It was relief. When I look back now, I don't see her as the villain of my story. She was the test, the reminder that not everyone who admires your work admires your heart, that the smarter someone sounds when they flatter you, the more carefully you should listen. The people who study you most closely are not always the ones who love you. Some are just memorizing the lines they plan to forge. But the beauty of it all, the part that keeps me hopeful, is that even the worst deception can't erase the parts of you that are real. Your integrity, your persistence, your willingness to stand back up. The ink may blur, but character doesn't. I've learned to stop wishing for closure that looks like justice served in headlines. Real closure is quieter, it's choosing peace over proof. That's what the Blue Ink Foundation became for me, a way to turn pain into protection to make sure no one else falls for the same brand of charm dressed as care. We've helped dozens of people rebuild their lives after financial manipulation. And each time someone tells me I thought it was my fault, I remember the night I said the same thing to myself. It never is. Love isn't supposed to make you smaller or confused or afraid of your own signature. If it does, that's not love, it's control disguised as devotion. So if you're listening to this right now, maybe from your kitchen, maybe from your car after another long day, and something in this story feels familiar, I want you to hear me clearly. You're not crazy and you're not weak. You're waking up. That's what truth feels like at first, disorienting, blinding, but cleansing. Let it come. Let it show you what was real and what never was. And when it does, promise yourself this: don't let bitterness be the only thing that survives. Let knowledge survive too. Let the lesson outlive the wound. Because knowledge, not anger, is what finally made me free. If my story has reached you, if it's made you pause, if it's reminded you of your own strength, let me know you're here. Drop a simple listening in the comments, or tell me where you're from. I love knowing how far truth can travel, how many hearts it can reach across distance and language. And if you believe in stories that help people heal, stories that show you can lose everything and still find yourself again, then hit subscribe, join this space, and stay. This isn't just my story anymore. It's ours. Every time someone listens, every time someone speaks up, the silence that once protected deception gets smaller. That's how change begins, one voice at a time, one truth at a time. Because in the end, that's all it ever was: ink, light, and time. The ink that tried to rewrite my life. The light that exposed what it hid. And the time that proved nothing forged can last forever. So thank you for listening, for being here, for letting my story find you. The ink has dried, the lies have faded. But the truth is still alive, still breathing, and so am I.